In our first panel of the day, we will be discussing the first steps to protecting your operational technology, OT. To take us through this is Judy Ngore, who is an information security consultant. If your organization is among those just getting started on developing a robust approach to OT cybersecurity practices, this session will cover what steps you should take first. From assessing your existing systems to building a culture of cyber awareness, it will lay the groundwork for designing, implementing, and maintaining a cybersecurity OT infrastructure. Kindly join us in welcoming the moderator, Judy Ngore.
Thank you so much, my panelists. Let's just delve in, yeah? This is the world of cybersecurity, and we want to understand, first of all, basics, yeah? Kindly help our audience understand the difference between IT cybersecurity and OT cybersecurity. How do they differentiate the two? Anyone can pick it up.
I think I can start. So when you think about IT, you're thinking about data. For example, you have your Microsoft Word, you have music, you have all this kind of stuff. You're talking about data. When you think about OT, you're talking about processes. So automation, automating. Think about, for example, maybe you may have watched, these videos with, for example, if you think about an industry that is squarely in that line is something like Tesla. You may have watched those robotic arms doing their job. That is OT. Basically, some software that is coordinating the hardware to do the job. So, coordinating that process. That is, I think, the simplest way that I can put it.
I like your explanation.
And I think in addition to what Sam has explained, when you talk about the OT, it's more about looking at, running technology on your assets. Your plant, and especially looking at it from the perspective of, for example, car in general, we deal with assembly and we do with manufacturing of elements, right? And we do this using big machines and big plants. And for the longest time, we've had human beings running this technology in terms of coordinating the processes. Now, bringing the OT basically look at how can you integrate these systems so that they can be able to communicate to one another. They can be able to, run the process without the intervention of the human being, especially looking at it in terms of the AI, in terms of machine learning and things like that. The IT space and looking at it is what exactly Sam has put in place, looking at the digital data, digital records and the communication bit of things. And for example, and talk about the ERP and running the process in terms of what can I generate my invoice, end-to-end process and things like that. That's more on the IT space. But OT then run the equipment, so the plant or the machines, to ensure that they're properly coordinated and you'll be able to get the data and even analyze with OT. Yes.
So first, do you agree?
Definitely. And I don't think I can add so much into it.
Yeah.
Just as they've said, both Gilbert and Sam. When you talk about IT, you're talking about data and information. Then operational technology, this is just the physical controls that run the information and the data.
Okay. Short and sweet. Patrick?
Yeah, maybe just to sum it up, I think with the theme of the conference talking about smart manufacturing, basically we'll just wrap it up and say that OT is talking about how to make your industry to become smart.
Yeah.
In a way that you can be able to generate data, and then how can I pick this data and maybe automate it.
Okay.
So it could be very simple things like I have maybe a pump that tends to switch it off after it pumps, say, a certain volume.
Yeah.
It meets a certain threshold, then we want to switch it off. Or we want to pick up some important information like, say, vibration, maybe across our production line.
Yeah.
Maybe this should be like a predictive way of how do you know when to do a maintenance and so on and so forth.
Okay.
So basically maybe at the end of it all, you have a convergence of where OT and IT meets.
Yeah.
And I think that should also be able to kind of frame our conversation as we start talking about cybersecurity.
All right. Just to, on the same context, maybe Sam, you can tell us how important it is to have cybersecurity in OT, because I know people are focusing so much cybersecurity in IT. We've really abandoned the OT part of the business. So how important is it?
Okay, so when you think about OT, it is, first of all, to demystify it a bit also, we should know that this thing has been there.
Yeah.
Right? These for these controls and all these PLCs and all these, they've been there. The only thing right now is that we are now connecting them to IT. For example, as you said, the convergence with IT and OT, we are now connecting them, for example, to an ERP so the management can see the data. Now, how important is it? It is important because it helps us to optimize. Think about it in this sense. Human beings, if you tell a human being to do a task or to generate a product, 100 items, they will all be they will vary in different way, right? But the machine is able to consistently produce the same, if it's 2 ml, from 0 to 100, right? So that consistency is very important. So that is why 4T is very important, because it helps us to achieve quality control, same product, stuff like that. Now, how do we secure it, and why is cybersecurity a very important topic in OT? Now, previously these systems were air-gapped. You needed engineers to be there to handle these instruments, all the controls and everything. You needed them to be on site. There is no way for them to do it remotely. But now we are now connecting them or exposing them to the internet. And remember, there are different sensors. These sensors are communicating with each other. The data is probably converged into a gateway somewhere, and then it is integrated to an ERP system or something for the management, right? Now, look at the cybersecurity aspect actually now comes in at that level of the communication, the network, right? So these you cannot handle. Then the other thing you need to know is that since they are small systems, when you talk about OT, you're talking about things that are in embedded hardware, which doesn't have a lot of compute resources. So you cannot install, for example, if you think about IT, we have tools, we have antiviruses, we have nowadays even AI antiviruses or HDRs that are using AI, but you cannot install these things or these agents in those components.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the approach for IT cannot work for both.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's it.
I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you, how much budget do you think people need to allocate, organizations need to allocate for OT cybersecurity? Give us a number off on top of your head. I know it's not part of the question.
Okay. As part of number one, what I would say is this. When you think about that security, think about it like an onion. Security is like an onion. You have to layer it up.
Yeah.
So you cannot talk about one tool that is going to be a magic bullet. So if you talk about a budget, I would say once you classify your assets, your OT assets, and handle them in criticality, so that if this system there's a system, if affected, has a capability to maybe shut down the whole production, right?
Yeah.
So of course now once you handle them, you then allocate the budget. Proportionally. There's one that is if affected. Okay, we can have a few people handle that manually.
Yeah.
But there's one that will actually hold the process or even cause damage to the equipment, because probably it's working with temperature controls. So imagine if there's an equipment that is working handling temperature and now everything is messed up.
Yeah.
You have the ability to mess up the whole equipment.
Yeah.
So in terms of budget, I would say the exec needs to pump in some money and just...
How much money?
How much money?
How much money?
As much as you pump into your sales department.
Sounds like a politically correct answer. You sound like you're giving us a politically correct answer.
It's not politically correct.
Yeah.
It's really, it's the conversation has to be. It cannot be. There's no one line. As I said, it has to be layered.
Yeah.
There's no give it $1 million, give it $1 billion.
Yeah.
You have to look at that. How critical is it? But again, when we come to security, we normally say, if you stand the chance to lose $1 billion if the production line was maybe halted for a day. How much is 100 million for you to allocate it to security?
Yeah.
Just to, Yeah. So those are the factors that you would actually look at to say, so that now that 100 million can actually go into helping to layer.
Okay.
And you notice that because
OT, when for example, the normal networking tools that we use to map out the network, they look at the live communication.
Yeah.
Some OT equipment could be dormant. Some sensors could be dormant somewhere, and they are not probably being used. They are not sending any communication. So if you have a live scan that is only scanning the flow, then you stand to miss maybe around 30% of the OT that is or you could even have a rogue OT sensor somewhere that is just waiting for the rogue actor to.
I like that point. And Gilbert, to what Sam has said, if I'm starting, I have an OT business, I have OT systems, and I'm trying to start cybersecurity strategy on them. What would you advise me as the initial steps that I need to take? And what exactly should I focus on when assessing to figure out what is very critical to the business?
So thanks, Judy. There's a number of things that you need to look at, and this depends on the organization. And just before I go into that, just to add in what Sam was mentioning about the budget, it really depends on the organization and the size of the OT you have in your space. In terms of what you need to look at, and giving the perspective of current general, for us, we've had a journey in terms of the digital transformation. And our initial focus on basically making the customer happy and driving the profit and making sure that we provide the data for the C-suite and the management to make decisions and drive the strategy on the same. But then we came to realize later, for these ends to be successful, you got to go back and look at the operations, right? And for you to look at the operations, that's now where the T comes in place. And basically here you're looking at, how do I drive efficiency? How do I look at quality controls and things like that? And for the perspective of car, for example, we do assembly of two-wheelers and three-wheelers. And for a product to be released into the market, just to go through one of testing, with a quality test. I'll just give an example, a motorbike, for instance. You got to test how efficient is the brake systems, and that splits up our safety, the rotations per minute and things like that, how efficient is the fuel and things like that. And even things like, for example, helmet, you got to test the quality and the security, because, it talks about the safety. And for you to be able to assess this, then you need to bring your T to a distributed system, right? You need to introduce the networks and things like that. And then that comes to a point of how do I protect? Because initially when these plants and machines were in silos, they'll just be like that until the end of the machines. But then when you introduce now the network, and then this system starts to communicate. You have the API because data has to be passed from one machine to another, and things like that. Then it brings now the elements of you need to discuss about the cybersecurity strategy in terms of the OT environment. And therefore, when you look at that, the number of things that you're looking at is, first of all, you got to have a strategy. The same. A strategy is informed by the size of the OT. How many machines do you have who are driven by OT? And things like that. So, and that takes us to point number 2, that you need to do the inventory listings, right? You got to list inventory in terms of the hardware, in terms of the software, and all the components that you have within the IT space, so that you can be able to protect. Because they usually say if you cannot measure, you cannot, if you cannot quantify, you cannot measure.
Yeah.
And if you cannot measure, you cannot be able to protect. So it's really very important. The first thing is just to come up with a strategy, and this is in line to the list of the assets that you have in terms of the hardware, software, and things like that. It also comes to how secure is my network, because now you talk about distributed systems. These equipment are speaking to one another, and therefore, because there's an IT space and there's an OT space, you got to separate the two. Because as some say, you cannot install antivirus, for example, or antivirus may not be practical. There are antivirus that we will. So you got first to do the proper network segmentation, and that is the first initial step to make sure that you secure your OT. The other very important components are coming up with a policy, because once you have a policy, it gives a directions of what needs to be done, and it forms the management and even the compliance team of what is required, and that becomes now part of continuous improvement, because your policy will inform what you need to do, like how frequently do I need to do an assessment in terms of cyber awareness about the team who's driving the OT. So those are very basic things that you need to look at. You got to come up with a strategy. You got to list the assets that you have in the OT space, right? You got to segment your network, and then come up with a policy that now will inform the directions in terms of what need to be done and how frequent, for example, you even need to do an audit on your OT space.
Yeah. Let me ask, for car in general, what is the most critical asset you guys have and that security takes priority on?
So, as I said, we are starting and we're in the initial stages.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, our earlier focus was basically more digital transformation
Yeah.
and looking at, driving a process on the side of making the customer happy.
Yeah.
But currently now we're going back and looking at, for example, at our manufacturing plants, right? We do manufacture helmets.
Yeah.
And we are looking at how do we incorporate the same, because we have a very good BI system that actually inform the management of the performance and even inform the management what we need to do in terms of way as a business. But then we look at this, for this other end to be successful, then we went back and look at our manufacturing plants, right?
Yeah.
We also have an assembly plants for 2-wheelers and 3-wheelers and so on. And as I said, that's very critical because one, it actually informs about the sector. Because before we release, for example, a 2-wheeler product, the market,
Yeah.
it just to go through series of tests.
Yeah.
And what we are doing currently is basically then incorporating or integrating our BI
Yeah.
to this OT system so
Yeah.
that we can be able to analyze data in terms of how many units to we produce in a day and in terms of defects, right? So that we can be able to measure efficiency and also things like that. And also adding into that, there's a lot of discussion about also the EV as well. We've seen what has happened for the last 3 days. There's a lot of discussions, especially about how do we transform because of we want to have a green environment. We want to reduce the carbon in space.
Yeah.
And for us to really go to this, you've got to automate your process because then you can be able to measure, like before I release a product, what carbon emission and things like that, and how can we reduce. And you cannot do that without, embracing the technology in that space. And that becomes very critical because your products is driven by the technology. And therefore, you got to protect that by making sure that you have the right cybersecurity in place to protect your OT system.
Sorry, technology. Back to the technology. Sam had mentioned integrating IT into OT becomes the most critical thing. And then you mentioned technology into your OT system. So I see how the two marry. It's very, very important. And on my left, depending on which part of the country you come from, you can call him Cephas or Cephas. Kindly do elaborate or give us some examples of incidences that have happened to OT companies that were really, really critical that people need to understand, even also effective and the consequences of such attacks on OT systems.
Thank you. I think I'll use a good example based on just the topics we're discussing, especially from Sun. When you're scanning your network and looking at your OT systems, and I loved what you said. There's just an idle OT sitting there, and none really bothered to check if it was updated. So I'll use the best example just to narrate of that. So in 2021, March, a very big oil pipeline. It's called the Colonial Pipeline, one of the largest in the US. It runs across the entire East Coast, and it does a production of about half the entire economy. So now what happened, just going back off to what Sam mentioned, just an idle OT machine that wasn't updated. And as a result, the VPN had a broken authentication. And that's how that trader were able to do what they infiltrated the system, ran a ransomware, and encrypted the entire Colonial Pipeline. It runs from Texas to New Jersey. So if you just have a geographical picture of how the US looks like. So what did this do? They encrypted the entire system, and as a result, the first thing that the IT team did was shut down their systems.
Standards.
So effectively, half of the US, the entire East Coast, didn't have fuel. So planes were grounded, the entire transport systems were off for a good 6 days. And that's on the last days, these guys had to part with 210 million just to get the decryption key from that trader. So, when you talk about what are the impacts, what are the financial or even economical impacts of it, this is just a clear indicator. And post-COVID, it's actually getting worse. Why? We are automating more. And as Sam pointed out, when we look at and even Patrick, when you do the convergence between IT and OT, automation kicks in. So when you don't pay attention to it, you become more susceptible as a result. So that is a good example, as much as there's so many in terms of what can really happen. IT is good.
Onto the same, would you also say ransomware has become the biggest issue for OT systems, or what cyber threat do you think the OT guys on OT need to be really, really careful on?
I will say it varies across different manufacturing sectors. Ransomware is effective in the sense that if they're out for financial gain, you really have no choice. Yes. And then, case in point, if you're to do, let's say, a denial of service, it could still impact you. So it really varies based on where you fall in the sector, so for manufacturing. But to answer your question, yes, ransomware is the most effective. These guys went at it.
Okay. The reason I ask is because, yes, depending on the industry, if I am targeting the financial industry, the motive is clear. I want some money, I want to steal some money. If I'm targeting government, is cyber espionage. Where I'm looking for data is companies with big data. So then for OT systems, now I'm interested to know, because I'm trying to shut down a manufacturing company or car company, what exactly would be my best, how would I approach it? What do I need to be careful on as a CIO, or on the other side as an attacker, what would be the best weapon I can use against such a company? That's why I asked about the ransomware.
I mean, if you look at manufacturing, especially if you're talking about OT, ransomware again wouldn't be so effective. Because again, we're talking about ICS controls as a basis. So ransomware wouldn't be the most ideal. I mean, denial of service, or either even running a malware. For example, I'll use Gilbert's company. I affect the robotics on the assembly. That becomes effective way more than asking for a payout. Because if I decide to encrypt using ransomware, he has availabilities and redundancies that he can fall back on. So most effective will be, a botnet attack, or more specific, just a malware that ensures they have to do what? Shut down the system. Or even just cause errors. And simple case in point. If I just introduce a malware and have the entire day production say it's defective, yet it's not. But you have the business.
That's true. As we assess business assets, the most critical assets, as we assess what the company would really not work well when it's under attack, we also need to assess our most vulnerable cyber threat as a business. So if it's a DDoS attack, Patrick, this would really cripple the business. If it's a ransomware, we can just recover. Business will still continue. So even as we assess the business assets, you need to also assess threats. Do you agree with me?
Yes, I do. And just to maybe piggyback on that question that you had asked him about what would be the most maybe vulnerable attack or threat exposed to an OT network. So remember, like, if you just do a bit of background history in the revolution for these industries before you come to Industry 4.0, which is what basically we are calling the OT. Everything just had to be money. So if you wanted to go and get a parameter, say, for this camera that is recording me today, maybe you want to check the temperature. So I'd physically send somebody there, get the details, and then record them in the book, and then be able to see how to transmit that back to maybe somewhere somebody is to do a monitoring. So with time, also the other key thing to note is that huge investments, and Gilbert can say this production line, they have this maybe very expensive equipment that were not tech enabled. So to say, with OT now, we are saying we just want to get some very light data from these devices. So with now the Industry 4.0, as the implementation was being done, so it's a very fragile network, meaning that there's just some data we want to query. And mostly it's we are querying data, and also we are sending data. And now the most concerning things, or the most prevalent things that in an OT network would be, if you want to do an espionage attack today, say against a power utility company, maybe I'll send a command to shut down a system. Or if it's a production line, I'll be very interested in how do I send a commands to cause disruption.
True.
Okay, so if you start looking at the issue of ransomware, then the issue of ransomware will only be effective at the convergence or at the edge where IT and OT is meeting.
Okay.
Okay, so what we are saying now is I have a plant 200 kilometers from here. I want to shut down a pump. So I'm going to use my computer, which is sitting on IT. I send a command to that particular device across an IT network. But at the convergence there is where now we're going to have a broker that will actually allow me to convert these commands into something that can be understood by the OT platform. So it would be like a pub, because a pub will not be able to understand a command from, say, a certain web application. Okay, but in simple terms, you can actually be able to just do that conversion. So when you start talking about maybe the critical things in terms of assessing the vulnerabilities, so those two have to be concurrent. So you cannot talk about OT security only and isolate IT. Because how do we access OT?
Through IT.
So, through IT. So the first thing, of course, starts by creating things like zero trust will be from the IT network. So I'll come and say, I have Judy and I have CFAS as administrators for OT network. So the devices that you allow them to use have to meet a certain threshold. So that becomes like the first layer of security we can. So when we jump over to the OT side, basic things you can do, network hygiene, I'll start by saying, let's do an inventory. How many assets we have? What versions of a embedded OS are they running? Because these things are not running an operating system. It's just basically an embedded maybe software that is running there. So we want to do a proper inventory. You want to see what patches are there, what patches are missing. Okay, and that becomes like your first line of defense. Because unlike a conventional IT where you have so many applications running on an OT segment of applications, will be basically just some embedded systems offering some services, and they have some open ports waiting for commands to come.
That's true.
And they can also be able to give the output that tell you this command has been executed, and I've actually been able to, this is out. So inventory for your assets is very key, like the attack is talked about, that it was basically an idle OT that has been forgotten, so have been patched. So that becomes your first line of defense. The second line of defense of what you want to do is to also monitor the commands that are being executed. So that you put in that OT, SCADA, POC, ICS system to tell you that they just issue commands. So those commands are very critical. So again, IT comes in with some bit of technology where we can say we want to monitor what commands have been executed, who has actually been able to execute these commands, and what was the purpose. And again, after they execute the command, what's the output? So if I'm controlling a pump, I'm controlling a motor, I'm controlling a robot, I've issued a command to it. So the command has been executed, then you also need to get feedback so that we are able to align ourselves and ask, is this in line with what we're doing? And of course, as you start to look at the other key things that is talking about, like the other approach would be for us to look in terms of just the procedures. And in terms of the, somebody talked about, I think it's Gilbert, he talked about the policies as well. Look at frameworks like NIST, they created their own, there's a framework there that you can actually be able to follow through. And basically it can just be a guidance or, what are some of these things that can actually be used. And then just to add on that, when it comes to now, the other key thing to really think about is just at this convergence, how do we segregate these two networks? In terms of maybe putting the necessary firewalls, making sure that the people who are actually accessing these networks are authorized, and maybe even restricted access. So this person has to be actually at a certain location for them to actually be able to access that particular.
Now that you're actually on a technical talk, I like that technical talk, and these frameworks, nice, Tell us, maybe you can help guys in the industry understand some of the tools that they can use to monitor cyber attacks and do some response.
That's a good question. So I think some of the basic tools would be to, first of all, get an asset inventory management software. So and the beauty is that you'll find that most of the, like if I used a case like a vulnerability management, because that would be like your first maybe step. You need to have visibility. It's like if I came to this building and somebody told me I need to secure a certain house, I'd want to scan the environment and figure out where would be the easiest maybe loophole for maybe an attacker to get in. So you'd look at tools from the vulnerability management side of things like Fortra. So Fortra acquired a company called Tripwire that has a very good ICS system. Can help you to do an inventory, log the commands, which are very key, pick output from this device. You have another tool like Tenable, which would also be very good to be able to help you scan. And the beauty is that what I've seen in the industry, most of the tools that are being used on the OT side are already leaders in IT.
True, very
Yeah.
true.
So then for the firewalls, you still have the normal leaders in the file space who would also now be able to provide you kind of a solution.
Yeah.
Remember, that network usually is very fragile.
Yeah.
So you can't do a normal scan with home devices.
Yeah.
If you do a normal scan, you crash those. So you'd have quite a number of interventions from what.
Okay. Yeah. Sam, would you have more tools there to add on to the same, or he's covered pretty much everything?
One of less sustainable is one.
Yeah.
Sorry, less sustainable is one of the very superior tools that is there.
Yeah.
In terms of other tools, I would say because the thing is this, there are only so many tools that you can use on the OT side.
Yeah.
But once you bring that data on the IT side,
Yeah.
now you're able to harness, for example, the logs and all those things. You're able to make use of that, because things you want to do is, for example, to have systems that once that data has been scanned and once the traffic flows have been scanned, you're not only monitoring for threats, you're also looking at behavioral analysis, so that you have a baseline of your network.
Yeah.
So this is how, ideally, this is how this one communicates to that. So if tomorrow there's a sudden surge in communication from one side of the controls to the other,
Yeah.
then the system will obviously give you some alerts and tell you, okay, something is happening here. We have some open source tools that can do that.
Yeah.
Something like Wazoo.
Yeah.
Wazoo is very good at doing those things. We have proprietary tools.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is only.
Yeah. It's okay.
So basically, and as you said, most of the firewall vendors have also some amazing tools.
Yeah.
Probably that, of course, some of them we pay top down.
Not always.
But they are amazing tools out there.
Yeah.
And to emphasize on one thing, because I'll give an example. It was not a very critical software, but you find there are some basic security things that people need to do.
Yeah. Segmented, yeah. Yeah.
It is just obvious for you to do that, right? The other thing is this: as you're architecting the OT side, there are things that don't need to talk to each other.
Yeah.
Right? So you need to architect it in such a way that you have these segments that this side never communicates to this side. Then again, also, if you're going to, once now you're transitioning with the OT to the IT side, you also layer with different vendor, for example, firewall.
Yeah.
Because to give an example, my code is starting to turn. To give an example, for example, you talk about a Fortinet firewall. Fortinet firewall, if there's a vulnerability on it and somebody has been able to get through to it, and that is what you're using to segment your sections of the network, for these various channels as they cross over to IT, then you notice that if they hack one, they're able to go through on the rest.
That's true.
So you obviously now do maybe a Sophos here, as Fortinet here, you can even do both of them.
Yeah.
Create internal tunnels between them.
Yeah.
I mean, architecting, how you architect the whole thing is where the genius comes in.
That's true. Also, this panel is not sponsored by Sophos, but I need to put that out there. Yeah, and the closing remarks as well from you guys to Cephas. In case of a cyber incidents for OT guys, apart from shutting down everything, what would you recommend as also your closing remarks, as we also get one from him?
It encompasses everything that I've talked about.
Yeah.
So we're planning from the policies in place for the framework.
Yeah.
And then lastly, just have a proper incident response team.
Yeah.
And more so rapid incident response team.
Yeah.
And check and make sure you have your high availabilities in place.
Yeah.
And make sure you have a solid backup plan in place.
Okay.
With all those, in contrast and to complement what my fellow panelists have said, this should be quick to do.
Okay.
And lastly, I love the question of budget.
Yeah.
That's because
oh, good. I like money conversation.
I'll close it just with this.
Yeah.
It's a famous quote by Benjamin Franklin. An ounce of prevention is worth
more than a pound of cure. So just use that.
Okay, I have a philosophist here. I don't know how to call them, Gilbert.
Thanks, Judy. And then I'll just allude what happened just the other day with the ECITSEC portal, the government portal that was hacked the other day, and the whole system was compromised. And then we were not able to access the service. I want to believe that like our values were many people of the same. Before then, I want to believe speaking about cybersecurity in that space will be easy.
Yeah.
But just because of what has happened now, it's become something very sensitive everybody want to talk about, and want to know how much you're secure. When you go to the OT space, for instance, and especially looking at it from the system, how much are they ready and deliberate to fund the cybersecurity for the OT space? And then I'll just mention what some are starting by saying that you have on the IT space, and giving an example of a server, for instance. If a server is affected, you can format the server, get the operating systems, and get it wrong. But OT is more different because some of these OT technologies are embedded to machines and the plants. And if they are compromised, it might be as good as taking that man back to the vendor so that it can be worked on and then it can be brought back. Look at the man hours that you use in terms of the productions and things like that. Yeah. So it's really very sensitive to look at what strategy we have in place to make sure that we are protected, especially looking at sensitivity of the OT space. So look at it from also what Sibas has said about the budget. The system and the board need to be very deliberate in terms of really funding to make sure that we are protected because of the sensitivity of the OT space. And basic things that need to be done is basically creating even the awareness and even appraising your IT team to even appreciate and understand as even you do the architecturing of this, especially the conversion point, so they can understand and appreciate that OT is more sensitive and therefore they can give, they can be able to protect it more because when they appreciate the sensitivity of it, they can be able to protect it more. And even towards the production for a team as well. It's very important to make sure that you create an awareness of this.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Closing remarks, sir?
Very brief. I think Cephas has really summed it up for us very well.
Yeah.
I think planning, awareness, and response.
Yeah.
And I liked what he added about a rapid response.
Yeah.
So I think that really kind of sense it.
So you're not giving us a budget as well.
Yeah. So for budget should be, maybe for me I would use a ratio.
Yeah.
So like if my plant is maybe has a production capacity of like $1 million every year.
Yeah.
So I need to like allocate a budget based on the output. So I could say there will be 5% of that.
I have a very political panelist. Yeah, I need a number. That's a good answer. Thank you. Yes, Sam.
My friend opened with the philosophy, so I think it's just fair and me to close.
Yes.
There's a theory called the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yeah.
The Dunning-Kruger effect is where people overestimate their abilities. And this is one of the things that we find when we go to have discussions about security. And you find the person sitting on the other side is very confident about their capability to secure their assets. The thing about that effect is that the moment you start thinking, that is the moment you start going down.
Yeah.
So as in security, you should always stay paranoid.
Yeah.
And that's number one.
Stay paranoid.
Stay paranoid.
Yeah.
That is very, very key.
Yeah.
And also stay hungry. In this sense, there are guys in their technology that are coming up right now. They are, if you think about it, try to research what the Teslas and these companies are doing, because the volume that we could be dealing with here could be 1,000. Those guys are dealing with 1 million. So challenges for 1 million cannot be tackled with solutions that can tackle 1,000. So those two things, that's what I would urge everybody in the IT space. Don't overestimate your abilities. Just know that you're lucky.
Yes.
Stay and have that mindset.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate you joining us today. The closing remarks from Sam were very good. Stay hungry and stay paranoid. I like stay paranoid. Please stay paranoid. Don't quote me. Quote Sam. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Okay.
Welcome to the Smart Industry Forum, where we discuss the latest tech developments and their impact on manufacturing and supply chain sectors in Africa. The forum will feature discussions on Industry 4.0 technologies in manufacturing, logistics, supply chain management, efficiency and productivity in smart factories, cybersecurity, and global trade impacts. Join us as we delve deeper into the industry world.